First of all, thank you so much for doing this. It was a really, really beautiful film, and I have a lot of things I want to kind of ask you, specifically with your Q&A afterwards, what you had to say kind of like about the archive. I think was really interesting.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, first of all, I'm just going to ask you, how are you? How's it going? How's it been in the
You
UK?
know, I appreciate that. I'm doing well.
Yeah,
I'm doing well. Yeah. I'm
good.
being well taken care of by
Okay,
Mia and all the crew. So yeah.
okay, good. I'm glad to hear that. Um, with the film, I'm just gonna ask with the POV kind of shots, and you're probably gonna be asked a lot of questions about that because it's unusual and it's really bold and it really, particularly with the ending, it really kind of strikes you in a specific way. How early on when reading did you kind of think about that, or in the process of developing the screenplay, did you think with adapting this book, I want to try and make it into this POV stuff?
It was the first idea that came to mind right after reading. It
Okay.
was something that was kind of foundational to the adaptation
Yeah.
process, and the entire thing was built from that initial idea, which is kind of interesting
Okay.
solely because I can't imagine what the film would be like if it would have been made, and
Mm,
or what it would be like if my co-writer had like questioned the idea. She was
mm,
just immediately like, "Oh, that's interesting. What
mm,
about what if?" And kind of went from there.
mm. Interesting. And I think as well, kind of what we see in this is we have with the growing up of Elwood, we have these kind of vignettes of his life. And I think it's really interesting when you incorporate that in the early scenes with the kind of like the real life instances we see with MLK and the
Mm.
speeches, and that kind of progresses. And this actually goes into my next question about incorporating the real into the fictional. All I've noticed, particularly with a lot of documentary filmmakers that go into making fictional films. I don't know if you've seen All We Imagine as Light. Um,
No, but I've heard it's amazing.
it is amazing. And what's really interesting is that I think the director, Hale, I can never pronounce her, Capadia, I think that's her last name.
Mm.
She also this is her debut feature, and what she does is that she, less so than you, she doesn't kind of use archival footage, but she incorporates in the early instances of the film real life people and their stories, and then she then goes into kind of the fictional. How did you, when creating this, how did you feel about getting these kind of, I mean, it's obviously based off of real life school, real life institution. How do you feel about kind of sublimating the real into the fictional in a way, and into this story about these two boys?
Yeah, it felt sublimating the real. I like that line. I think it was yeah, it felt kind of vital
Yeah.
and necessary and natural,
Mm,
whatever natural means.
mm,
And it kind of built itself up in that way. Like if I find, I can imagine another version of this film, as most people can, that don't have that in there. That's way more traditional, but
mm,
I find it hard to believe. Um, I would like to find it hard to believe that someone could come across the Dozier document, like this 150 plus page document that explored forensically,
mm,
explored and illustrated the things that were found when they like exhumed the bodies, the
mm,
exact location of the house or the White House to the dorm, and kind of laid
mm,
out the grounds, like all of this deep scientifically presented information that they wouldn't want to either honor that source material and
mm,
or find that more powerful than
mm,
anything that they would do.
mm,
And I guess the fiction film process typically uses that information as just inspiration and something to
mm,
like recreate,
mm,
but it's still, I think there's nothing more powerful than the portraits of those boys that were
mm,
actually at the Dozier School.
mm.
We're gonna go about making all these images and tell this story, but it seems almost unfaithful to the
Yeah,
actual thing because we have evidence and facts and proof of the actual thing. And
yeah,
also just if you then make images that are more fiction or traditionally produced, you if you tether them to these images, then it has a power that I think you feel, and it's not necessarily unprecedented, but I think we'll always feel unprecedented given the relationship between the fiction and the real in general.
No, of course, yeah. And yeah, you're right, it is really powerful. The instances we see, I think the photographs of the boys, and then we kind of jump from the photographs into the POV of Elwood in the modern times, contemporary times, looking at it. There's something
Mm-hmm.
really, I think, gut wrenching about realizing that these stories aren't just stories. This is a example of a possible story of what happened in real life, and we won't really know these stories because they've been lost to time. They've been, denied the ability to tell their own stories and their own voices, and
Yeah.
this is all we have.
It's almost like the film body is like recreating the
Mm,
time, and it's like filling out the actual timeline and
yeah,
creating some sort of proxy body
yeah,
for the experience in boys. There's like
mm,
something somatic about the
mm,
process now that you're with like tattoos, like the tattoos of maybe the images are tattoos of
mm,
the real images are tattoos on the body of the film of the
mm.
boys or something, you know?
Yeah, no, I get that. Yeah, it's very, like you said, Matt, it's really visceral. And it's almost kind of frustrating because you kind of want to reach out and throughout, like through history, reach out and talk to these boys, but you can't,
Mm,
have that, have the opportunity to do that. I'm kind of interested in what you said during the Q&A. You talked about the technical death of the back body when it comes to kind of the archive, when it comes to photographing these people. And I was just I wanted to ask about, for you, in terms of rescuing these boys from the archive, in terms of bringing people back, what does it mean? You're talking about it, people being seen. What does it mean to
mm.
you for a black person, a black body, a historical archival document to have someone now be seen in the present day?
You know, it's a complicated um question, and also I think I have an deeply considered response. I think that the gesture, starts as uh, a sort of intuition or an impulse.
Mm,
And, I feel like there's like essays to be written about the maybe philosophical implications and or the practical, um, the practical manifestation of a new version of them.
mm-hmm,
I will say that there's something I like to say, when black folks in particular are photographed, they die a
mm,
death, like a particular death of the imaginable. Um, and I think that there's a way in which they're able to be reimagined, and it just opens up kind of Pandora's box of possible future conceptual iterations. And
mm,
it doesn't mean that, you know, opening up the re-possibility for them to be imagined doesn't mean that they can't be reimagined in a negative light or, re-murdered or re-killed in
mm,
a visual way. But I think, yeah, opening the window again to let the natural world and the elements of it, do something a lot more, uh, biodegradable about the image, having it be not as fixed as what's
mm.
natural in the photographic process, specifically in the context of the power dynamics of its original capture,
Mm,
is, yeah, what is this a beautiful gesture? I think I would lean on, you know, Sadia Hartman's critical fabulation because she's been the most articulate and the most
mm,
clear about the power of recontextualizing and the need for it.
mm.
But something I need to think about a lot more.
Yeah. I haven't read that, but I read Sonntag's on photography, and she makes it's
Mm,
more so about kind of the war photography and images captured in conflict.
yeah,
Talks about, the image inherently being voyeuristic when you're capturing, and the power that
yeah.
can play there.
Well,
So
do me a favor,
yeah.
read Sadia Hartman's Venus in Two Acts. It's an essay. And I think that it'll actually change your life. I mean, it changes every person. I mean, when I read it, it was just like, well, everything's different now.
Mm,
You know?
yeah, cool. I like that. Okay, I'll have this recorded, so I'm gonna check that out. Thank you.
Mhm.
I also wanted to ask you, so I was just reading up about your background. So you're an educator and then you were a photographer for a while as well. Do you
Mhm.
think both of
Still
the
am. Still
still,
am.
still am, apologies. You were an educator and are a photographer for many years. Um, in terms of when it comes to this film specifically, and also I guess with Hale County this one this evening, when it comes to your background with young people with children, do you think that kind of affects the respect and the gravity you provide them, particularly in this film?
Yeah, definitely. The foundation of my critical practice,
Mm,
photography practice and film practice, etc., comes from working in the Hale County community in Greensboro,
mm,
Alabama,
mm,
and being confronted with making images of my students for my
mm,
own desire and
mm,
being unable to show them and unable to be satisfied with them because of their lack of reflexivity, because of the
mm,
problem of photography, the problem that I'm talking about, the archive. And, these are like at-risk youth and dropped out of school, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm like, this person's way more than the way that I see them in this image.
mm,
How if I'm feeling this with them, what's the relationship between everyone else that's ever been photographed
mm,
and the dynamic of the photographer?
mm,
Kind of like, send you on a spiral because you realize, maybe by default and natural programming, maybe you're part of the problem. And maybe the problem isn't as bad as I make it out to be, but it's something I care about.
mm. No, absolutely. So how do you open that door to that reflexivity? Is it by being able to show them, grant them the respect they deserve, or is it just inherently imbibed in the nature of taking the photograph itself?
Well, I think it's imbibed in the nature of taking the photograph itself, and I
Mm,
think what what I think we as people who are thinkers and culture needs at large is visual literacy,
mm,
and we need to be aware of the problems of the straight photograph
mhm,
and be aware of considering strategies to upend our natural inclination to sort of stereotype and place judgments on and project onto. The first thing that I came up with was to have I would take them with a 4x5 camera and it would be like an instant photo that's fairly large. I'd have them write one word that described themselves on the
mm,
top of the image,
mm,
anywhere they wanted, like some would write across their faces, like on the
mm.
side. And what that did is it created
The dialogue.
two versions, right? The way that they see themselves and the way
Mhm,
that I see them. And
mm,
just that tension there was enough to undermine that fundamental ability to see the thing as one,
mhm,
or to not
mm,
be not let the pendulum swing between, to not have two areas of analysis.
mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
so it's about strategies.
Yeah, that's really interesting. How do you think you're able to do that with the archival footage you have in this when you're not able to get these, historical people to write down,
Mm,
not able to get the boys of Nickel to write down what they see in their images?
well, I think here it's that they're organized in a project which is just producing new meaning by means of the juxtaposition between what came before and what came after.
Hmm.
And so the archive typically they're kind of like closed capsules and or they're just, you know, thumbnails on top of or near each other on websites or, maybe stuck in some digital hell unseen on some
Hmm.
large, hard drive or something.
Hmm.
But here they're part of the stream of consciousness of a character of me as the maker, and being inside that world. um it almost like it's folding the brain of our characters, so that you can see what they're thinking and how they're imagining the world. And then hopefully the way in which they're used here is
Hmm.
just open-ended. I'm interested in the ambiguity of the photograph, not the certainty of it. And
Hmm.
when we're giving them um this play and this really multi-dimensional uh analytical point, then I
Hmm.
think they're free. I wonder, like, what is an image that has free will? You know,
Oh, oh.
what is an image that can just go and do what it wants because it's unable to be captured by someone's certainty?
Hmm.
That's what I want for Black people in images.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you. We've just got a few minutes left. I'm just going to ask about just a wider question about kind of making this and working with Plan B. How did you feel about when you were approached by, is it Jeremy and Dee Dee?
Hmm.
How she, because obviously they have quite a legacy of making, incredible, really touching, really sensitive black films.
Hmm.
With like Moonlight, Wall Street, Last Black Man in San Francisco. Did you think that there was a did you feel safe kind of in that? I wouldn't say safe in their hands, but you know what I mean? Did you
Hmm.
think that they were
Yeah.
able to kind of create the kind of film that you wanted to make or in collaboration with yourself?
I was hesitant at first for
Okay.
sure, which is why I'd never, taken a meeting with another producer since I made Hale County this morning this evening. I just
Mm,
like kind of wasn't interested because it didn't seem to me based on the stories uh that preceded that process that
mm,
studio processes were
mm,
for folks like myself. Um, but despite everything that I assumed, they were quite, despite everything I assumed, they were the opposite of everything I'd heard.
mm,
They were deeply supportive. They were very you know, when it comes to like the needs of the story, and
mm,
they believed, they actually like they genuinely believed the vision, I
mm,
think a lot of the conversations become hard because money is involved and you can't do everything you want, and some things have to take priorities, but what was beautiful was that unlike what I would think, like all those decisions were at my discretion.
mm,
They weren't something that was forced. They were suggestions, and they were,
mm.
sometimes stronger and sometimes not as strong. But I know I'm not being very articulate right now, but
I
it's
know
quite nice.
that's nice to hear. On a personal note, I worked with Dee Dee and Jeremy. I was working on the F1 film, just in production,
Oh
and they're
yeah,
really nice people. So it's
yeah,
good to hear that. Yeah, yeah. I'm glad to hear they're good to work with and they're really supportive as well because
yeah,
they seem particularly kind and often with big producers, it's hard to tell.
yeah. Also, I think that kindness begets kindness. I think I have a certain. I mean, I'm relatively easygoing, but also I think that they're just so smart.
Mm,
Like the conversations around film and the ideas behind them, they're just really, really, really smart. And
mm.
there's
Yeah,
nothing better than, yeah, talking with someone who understands.
yeah, absolutely. Great. Thank you so much. We'll
Yeah.
finish that.